Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of the Just Football podcast. We're back, guys. Hope you're all well. This is the show that delves into kind of the deeper side of the game, looking at players, coaches, managers, sports lawyers. We've had all kinds of people on the show, youth development, and on this particular episode we're going to focus on management in the lower leagues and coaching, how you make your career in the game, how you sort of pave your way as a young coach in the football world. And to do that, I'm very pleased to say we're joined by none other than Darren Currie, who is a young manager learning his trade, and he's had a successful career in the game, played for so many different teams, starting his career at West Ham United, and has been at many clubs, made 120 plus appearances at Wycombe, played for Brighton, Ipswich Town, Dagenham and Redbridge, Hendon among others, and has recently had a successful spell in charge of Barnet FC. Now, Darren took over at Barnet in 2018 as an assistant manager, and then eventually took over the manager's job and turned the club around really and got them into the National League playoffs, which took place at the end of the 2019-20 season. Of course, we had the pandemic, but that stopped the season in effect, but Barnet eventually qualified for the playoffs. Darren joins us now, and we're going to talk on this show about kind of coaching, what you do in your day-to-day life as a manager, and you know, navigating your way through the lower leagues. So Darren, thank you so much for your time and thanks for joining us. How are you today?
I'm really well, thank you. So thanks for having me. Looking forward to having a chat.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I mean, as I just said to you off air there, part of the reason that I was attracted to kind of speak to you is because I kind of followed non-league quite closely, and like I say, I was really impressed with the work you did at Barnet, and I think a lot of people were as well, the fans. When you left, you obviously recently left the club, but when you left, there was a real seemed like there was a real depth of feeling from the Barnet fans who maybe wanted you to stay, and you've done such a great job turning them into a playoff contending side, and narrowly missed out on promotion in the end, but. Just tell us about, you know, we'll start there and sort of say, how was your time at Barnet, and, you know, how are you feeling at the moment? You obviously had a little bit of a break now, you're out of the game at this moment in time, looking to get back in. How's that period of time been for you?
Listen, it's difficult because I don't want to be out of the game. I've since the minute I left school when I was 15, 16 years old and went to West Ham as a YTS, I've been involved in some capacity for the past 30 years. So to have this sort of 2-3 month period where I'm not involved in the game is quite frustrating, to be honest, because I live and breathe football. So to not have it in my life as much as I've had in the past 30 years has been tough, and obviously with the pandemic as well, I've been limited as to how I can get out and watch games and visit training grounds and sort of develop even more by watching and looking at other people, how they work. So in that respect, it's been a little bit frustrating, but you know, it was a decision that I made myself. I chose to part my ways with Barnet, but it certainly won't tarnish my feelings towards the club. I enjoyed a period of my playing career there, and I'll always look back fondly on an 18-month period that taught me so much, but it also was my first step into management, and one that gave me so much to sort of look into where I can improve and obviously where I feel my strengths are, but certainly an 18-month period that has done nothing but just completely whet my appetite and make me look forward to potentially, as long as I do well and I'm successful with it, the next sort of 15-20 years as my life as a manager in the game.
Yeah, and you took over from sort of John Still, the step down, the legendary John Still, of course. Barnet fans will be very familiar with him, and you know, so will many people within the game, especially within the lower leagues. He stepped down around in December 2018, and you were basically assistant manager at that time, and you were asked to take over, and that's where your sort of managerial career began. John Still described you at the time as a young protege, and he said, you know, he's going to support your growth as a coach. How important was it having someone like John Still, and having, I mean, I assume maybe he was a mentor figure for you as an assistant manager. How important was that for you before you stepped into the role, or did you already feel really in your mind that you could do it? Because obviously for managers in general, that first opportunity is really quite hard to get, isn't it? And you seem to take it, and you really ran with it over those 18 months, didn't you? How important was it to have that support from, people around you and maybe a mentor figure?
Yeah, I think it's pretty crucial that you have your own knowledge from what I've learned over my playing days and how I've pretty much felt about football since a small boy. I'm obsessed with the game. I love the game to bits. I miss playing. I mean, first and foremost, if I could rewind the clock and start playing again, I'd do it in a heartbeat, because I'd much rather be on the pitch than on the touchline. But yeah, I always felt that management is where I want to go. I want to coach. I wanted to manage, because I feel I've got a lot to offer. And obviously I'd had a couple of spells in my career playing under John. And when he originally came back to Dagenham and I was his assistant there, I wouldn't say, and he'll tell you the same. We see the game slightly different with our styles and how he wants to play and obviously how I want to play. But it still didn't take anything away from our relationship. I still speak to him regular. But that's a nice thing about what I describe good football people. They don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong way of doing it. Football people who just love the game think there's a style for everyone. And John has been that figure in my career as my manager when I was a player, and now he's a huge support to me as a young and sort of up and coming manager. And he's always been there to guide me and give his opinion. And like anyone in football, they give their opinion, and it's up to you whether you want to use it or not. And not just with John. In all fairness, I worked under Wayne Burnett and worked alongside Warren Hackett, who have been a huge support. We're always on the phone and meeting up and discussing football. I've got my father-in-law, Steve Walford, who has been number 2 to Martin O'Neill for 25 years. So sure. I've got good people around me that are very forthcoming with their opinions on and how things should be done. And like I say, the game is about opinions, and you take these opinions on board and you either run with them or you mould them into your own style. But it's always nice to have them sounding boards in the background for when you need them, because these guys are very experienced football people that can only help me.
Yeah, 100%. You say there that you had an ambition to go into coaching, and you knew that you wanted to be in management and that kind of thing. At what stage in your career did you think to yourself, that I want to have a career as a manager? Was there sort of a flashpoint in your mind one day where you suddenly thought to yourself, I want to be a manager? Or was it kind of like you were taking notes as your career went along and you always had that opinion?
No, I always wanted to go into coaching and management. I knew the path I wanted to take from a young age.
Sure.
But in terms of the point in my career where I made a conscious effort to make that transition was when I signed for Chesterfield. I believe, thinking back now, I was 33 at the time. And I went up to Chesterfield and I made a conscious effort to make a start on my coaching qualifications. My wife went back to college to study to become a design and technology teacher. Oh, wow. So when we both moved up there, and our children were very small at the time, we just made the effort. Like I say, she went back to college to study, and I started on my coaching courses, knowing that eventually when we moved back down south, back home, that my career, unfortunately, my playing career would come to an end, and it would be about the second part of my journey, which is the coaching side of it. So it was always a path, always a path I was going to take. Like I say, because I'm obsessed with the game. But it was really at that age, my early 30s, where I made the conscious effort to make a start on it.
Well, that's fascinating, yeah. And I mean, you took over at Barnet when they were in, relatively sort of middling club at that time, not really having a huge amount of success necessarily. And you were in charge for 64 games, 23 wins. 21 draws and scored 80 goals during that time, leading to the club eventually getting into the playoffs. And what was the first thing what were your first impressions when you got to Barnet? And what were the first things that you immediately thought I need to change as a manager? Having seen it from an assistant coaching point of view, what were the, you mentioned there, for example, that you and John still maybe don't necessarily have the same vision of football. What was your kind of philosophy of football? What did you see when you got to Barnet? And this is your first role, obviously, quite a big club. What was the first things in your mind when you finally got that opportunity?
Well, firstly, one thing that you're taught on the coaching courses is to have a belief and have a philosophy and through thick and thin stand by it. And John had a way of playing that was slightly more direct and a bit more get it forward quicker. And John had built his philosophy and stood by it for the 40 years he was a manager and had huge success from it. So it's like I say, it's not being negative towards the way he played, because he was very successful with it and stood by it, and rightly so. But my style was more of a possession-based style, and it was more of just how I saw the game as a player, how I believe the game should be coached, and how I want to see football played. But in terms of when the one thing that John was very good at is, although he was the manager and we was the myself and Junior Lewis were the coaches, John kept us very much in the picture, and obviously we was his staff, we was his allies, so we was very much in the picture when we first turned up at Barnet, and it was very clear to see that the club was in a difficult period at the time, having just been relegated. They had a number of players on the books that the squad needed a complete reshuffle and a rejig.
Sure. And
John signed a number of players as well. So there was big numbers in the squad. So it was certainly a club that needed reshaping and needed a bit of direction. So if I fast forward to when John eventually left, the one thing that I wanted, as well as what I wanted to see on the pitch and what I wanted to see on the grass with the players, one of my most important tasks that I set myself was trying to reconnect all the fans with the team and the players and the club.
Sure.
Because I look back to my playing time there, and I've stated this a number of times. I had a really good time playing there, and the type of player I was, I needed that support from the fans to be able to express and play the way I wanted to play. And the fans were brilliant with me. And I needed to recreate that, because we had some good players, and most players, let's have it right, most players want to feel the love from the fans to be able to play to the level that they're capable of. They need to feed off of the confidence from the fans. And I was fortunate enough to have that when I played there, and I wanted to recreate that when I was a manager. So I put a lot of time and effort into getting the fans together, trying to get them back on board, trying to make them buy into what I wanted to do. And to be fair, by and large, I don't think many managers will say that. Maybe your Klopps and your Guardiolas of this world have got the 100% backing, but the rest of us, you want to just get as big a percentage as you can of backing it. And I wouldn't say I had 100% support, but I would say I had a good 95%, which I was really pleased with, because they really did get behind me in the team. But that was an important part of my job. I wanted to reconnect everyone, and I wanted everyone to feel, and this is players, fans, and all my staff, I wanted everyone to feel how I felt about football. And that is, we're lucky that football's in our life. So when we walk through the door in the morning, walk through happy, walk through with a smile on your face. You're playing football, you're part of a football team, and this is your job. And that's how I always looked upon it. Is I couldn't wait to get to work, because I've got to put my boots on and have a kickabout for a few hours.
Yeah.
So why not embrace that and enjoy it? And I needed people to sort of be infected by how I felt about the game, and I think by the end of the 18 months I was in charge, I think I started to infect people with how I feel about the game. But certainly at the start, it was the one or two of the things that I wanted to achieve is make the players enjoy playing for the club again, and make the fans enjoy watching their team play again. And listen, it started well and it started positive, so I got off on the right foot, which I'm very grateful for. We had a good victory in my first game, and then we drew in a local derby back at the Hive, and obviously went up to Sheffield United and won in the FA Cup. So it was a really positive first week in the job, but it was only just the start. So it was just a good building block to start with.
How would you say that you transmit that enthusiasm that you have for the game to players? And do you find that maybe in the lower leagues, compared to obviously you've played for Ipswich Town and others, do you notice or see that it's hard to motivate players at the lower down you are, or is it kind of just you had maybe some players in the dressing room that had been through whatever and needed remotivating? How do you look at your job as someone who has to motivate players? How do you get into their minds and that kind of thing? What's your take on that?
I'm very big, John, on relationships, and if you all take a moment to think about all the various different relationships in your life, whether it be with your wife, whether it be with your kids, or whether it be with your work colleagues or your boss or whatever, it's for you to get the best out of yourself. 9 times out of 10, you're in good relationships right across your life, and that's like I'm a happy, really happy dad, and I'm a really happy husband because I love my relationship with my kids and my wife and my family, and I build them relationships with players, and it's not. So what we do, so a lot of what I done was, you'll be surprised when I say this, as simple as it sounds, but I was pulling players in the office and we was having conversations. Tell me about your life. Tell me about where you grew up. Tell me about why do you love football? Where do you want to go? What's your ambition? And a lot of the time, by just sort of picking players' brains, and you get to understand the player, you get to understand the person as well.
Yeah.
And then you can learn about them and their characteristics, and then you can start to flip that round and start to use it as a tool to drive them and help them and develop them. So I'm big on relationships, and my door was always open. Unfortunately, at the Hive, there is doors everywhere. There is a ton of doors everywhere.
That's true.
It's like a maze to get in and out of the place at times.
It's true.
But I made sure that where we was working every day, all doors were open.
Yeah.
So it weren't sectioned off. We was in it together. So every door's open. You walk past my office and you say good morning. We say good morning. I might pull someone in. We might talk about the game that was on the telly the night before. What did you think about how he played and he played? And you start to just help them grow. And for me, relationships are absolutely crucial. And I made sure from day one that I started to build my relationship with all my players.
Yeah, and it's fascinating you say that, because often what you find, when you study the top managers in the game, I always find it quite interesting and maybe a little bit of insight. People used to say, for example, Sir Alex Ferguson, players used to say one of the best things about him is he knew my wife's name, or he knew my kid's name, and it's a little touch, really, isn't it? Sometimes you just think it's quite a simple thing, but it does have that kind of effect, doesn't it, building those relationships, and then it does make you wonder maybe about that relationship side and how important it is to get it right, the likes of Klopp as well, like you say. So that's really fascinating. I mean, we'll come to a question maybe a bit later about your, maybe people that you look up to in the game or that you look to as a coach. But I wanted to ask you, firstly, your day-to-day training and sessions, because like you say, you had a really good cup run when you joined. The club finished sort of mid-table, and then the next season, like I say, you got them into the playoffs. When you were imprinting your philosophy, you said you focused on the relationships, you focused on getting to know the players, getting to know what drives them. on the coaching field itself, what was there anything that you changed, or was there anything that you mentioned possession and that kind of thing? What's your day-to-day training sessions like? How do you tend to structure your day, your week, for any sort of young managers or people who were looking to get into the game, as an example? What did you look to do as you got in to sort of change things on the training field?
I think first and foremost and again, I know sometimes you can hear coaches and managers talk and you think, well, that's obvious.
Yeah. But
sometimes the obvious and the common sense side to coaching is very powerful. And a lot of what we done on the training pitch was obviously how I wanted to play on a Saturday. So it's got to so both have got to work together. So for example, you can't not do possession-based stuff Monday to Friday and then go out on a Saturday and demand that everyone keeps the ball.
Yeah.
So it sounds so obvious, but you've got to practice what you want to see. So, and it might be as simple as, you might do some pattern of play, and your pattern of play, and again, it sounds quite obvious, John, but you'd be surprised some don't do it. But if you're going to play 4-4-2 at a weekend, then a lot of how you work through the week should be based around the 4-4-2 and based around your sort of core beliefs that you want to see within the 4-4-2. So, a lot of how I worked. Certainly, if I split my 18 months into two periods, when I took over halfway through a season, a lot of, I think, the skill set that was needed was about motivating and, lifting the spirits and changing the mood around the place, which I think is a key skill set that you have when you take over halfway through a season. When you have your own pre-season and you're doing it from day one, then all of your principles and all of your beliefs are there from that first minute you turn up on day one of pre-season.
Yeah.
So it is slightly different. But one thing that I said to the boys, and it's not what I used to say to them, is, in my opinion of football, in when I look at my career, is I've played for teams that play various different styles, but the hardest team that I played for was a team like Ipswich, for example, where the demands on keeping the ball, you have to be so fit to keep the ball. And if you look at the modern day, your Liverpools and Man Cities, they tend to work the hardest, even though they have the most possession, because the amount of unselfish running, the amount of running you have to do off the ball.
Yeah.
So when I played for Ipswich and we was dominant and a possession-based team, it's the fittest I ever was. So the first thing I said to the boys was, we've got to be fitter because we're going to dominate the ball. So again, like I say, a lot of how we trained was based around football fitness and based around unselfish running, because you have to be unselfish within a team that wants to dominate the ball. Because if I go deeper into my beliefs, it's like every time that one player lands on the ball, he should have the other 10 making his mind up for him. So there should be 8-9 different movements every time he lands on the ball. So that means your fitness level's got to be greater, because you might have to make 10 runs to only touch the ball once.
Yeah. So
a lot of where I come from was, football fitness. So everything we done from the minute I took over, everything we done was with a ball, because that's how that's my biggest value in the game, is dominating the ball.
Yeah, and pressing today as well, pressing and being aggressive on the front foot, and the fitness it requires is quite important, really, isn't it? And certainly a part of the modern game. What would you?
Do you know what with that, John? Right, so it is a part of the modern game, but the way we used to do that, the way I used to like to do that, is say that we enjoyed having the ball so much that when the ball did turn over, we wanted to get it back quickly because we enjoyed having it so much.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's just it's terminology. It's how you talk to your players to make them buy into what you want to do.
Yeah, 100%, and you make a good point there, I think, for sure. What in terms of sort of tactics in the lower leagues, what do you need to win matches at that level? Because, I quite enjoy studying different leagues and different levels, and you've got maybe different styles of play. Maybe in, let's say, Spain, it's more possession based. You've got the Premier League it's hugely intense. There's maybe a perception that the lower down you go in England, in the lower leagues, it's a bit kind of maybe hoofball, and I don't necessarily, people might have their own opinions on that, but I'd like to get the insight from someone who actually has the challenge of trying to get results every week, rather than talking in cliches. So from your point of view, how do you gain that edge? How do you, what do you actually need to do to win matches at that level? Do you need to? You hear some managers say, "Well, I don't really want possession in the lower leagues because I just want to get the ball up to the forwards as quickly as possible and lay it off and have a big man up front and hoof it in there." Which is fine. That's a style of play, But what's your take on that? What's your idea on what you need to do to win these games, the tactics and that kind of thing?
So what I want to develop players as well as win games. So of course we're all in it to win. Ultimately, that's it. But I want to develop players as well, and especially when I was at Barnet, when I had some real talented boys there. Now, to help develop players, you've got for them to understand, whether it be technical stuff or tactical stuff. For me, it's fairly obvious. The best players in the world are the best decision makers. It goes without saying. Yeah. So, to create better decision makers, you've got to give them the tactics to understand. You've got to give them all the scenarios to understand. And I used to say to my back three, back four, whatever it might be, as much as I want you to be start off all our attacks and build all our attacks and pass the ball and handle the ball well, your first 5 decisions within a game might be that you have to smash the ball in the crowd, because that's that decision for that moment in the game. But then in the next game, your first 5 decisions might be getting it off the keeper and punching a ball into midfield and building an attack. So you have to create these scenarios on a regular basis, whether it be on the grass or through analysis and looking at opponents, and then you build your tactics around that. And there is quite a variation of tactics the lower you go down. I would say in the Premier League, everyone wants to play the beautiful game and wants to play a very similar style. But the best teams play it the best, and the lesser teams play it not so well. But when you go further down the league, there are teams that choose to play a bit more direct. They've got bigger men. They want to play off of set pieces and that. So sure, you have to adjust your tactics accordingly. Now there was scenarios last year where we was involved in some really good tactical battles and really good football matches. So if I give you an example, John, the majority of the games we dominated the ball. So that would tell you that teams would sit deep, maybe, sure, and they call it a low block nowadays, don't they? But teams would sit deep, so we had to work on how to break down teams that sat deep, but be also mindful of teams that then want to counter-attack us. So you set your team up accordingly to that. And then there was times where we would go into certain games where we thought the balance of possession might be quite equal here, so we might spend that week working on counter-attacking stuff because the balance of the game might be a little bit fairer. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So we would spend the week working on counter-attack and how we might use our speed and how we might get in behind a bit quicker. Instead of 5 passes, it might be 3 passes, for example. So I'm a firm believer in you've got to be flexible. You've got to be flexible with systems. You've got to be flexible with style of play, but with my core value that I always go back to, that if you can't play the right pass, then just don't give the ball away. That I will never be able to change that, because that's just in my head and how I see it. Ultimately, don't give the ball away, because I can't get my head around it enough, John. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So that is my core value, and what you try to create along the way is good decision makers, and just keep. And do you know what? What I tended to do, and what I will always do and continue to do, is I always get players' feedback and opinions on it, because we all see the game different. One player might just say one thing that makes you go, yeah, I get that, fair point. And that creates that little buy-in as well, that the players feel like they're part of something and they've got a voice as well. So,
it's fantastic.
we had...
Go on, sorry.
Sorry, mate. Go on.
No, I was going to say, because you mentioned there that you had a possession-based side, and sometimes you would play on the counter-attack, that kind of thing. I mean, you had a fantastic player in Josh Taylor, didn't you? Jack Taylor? Sorry, Jack Taylor, yeah. Who went to Peterborough as well in the end, and he, he's fantastic on the ball, isn't he? So you had some sort of talent in that squad that you were able to develop there. But yes, it's really interesting to hear that, because you like I say, you do get maybe stereotypes about the lower leagues, but I think, speaking to a lot of managers that I've spoken to in the past, they have really clear ideas about the game, and you're obviously part of that. You're a thinker of the game, and it's interesting just to hear that it's not as it's much more sophisticated, I think, the lower leagues than people tend to make out. I mean, you mentioned their analysis as well. I think analysis is becoming a little bit more prevalent, isn't it, in the lower leagues, and a bit more common. There's more video about now, that kind of thing. Do you spend a lot of time on the analysis? Did you have a team, or was it just yourself and your assistant maybe watching games and going back and identifying little things you can do to get the best out of your team?
We had a guy who still works at Barnet at the minute, a young guy called Daniel Hutchins, and he's very good. He's really good at his job, and he was very useful for us. And listen, like I stated earlier, he loves his job as well. So he would quite likely most days pop up with loads of little bits of information, whether we've asked for it or not, because he loves the game, so he'd pop up with information. But I think it's a brilliant tool. I think players want to know more about the game themselves now. They certainly want to know about opponents and direct opponents that they're up against. So fullbacks might want to know about wingers, like we're playing against so and so today. Is he right-footed? Does he go outside? Does he come inside? Is he quick?
Yeah.
So we can, you chop up little bits about your opponent as a team and individuals. And I wasn't, and I'll be honest, I wasn't someone that overdone the information on the opponent. I gave them some detailed information on styles of play and maybe set pieces and key players that might be in the opposition team. But I like to back up all my beliefs and all my philosophy with, listen, they're going to bring A, B and C today, but I'm telling you, if we're at it and we do what we do and you do what you do and you're on your game today and so on and so on, doesn't matter what the opponent brings, it's about us. Yeah. So I come from that angle a lot, although I do certainly, I think you have to touch on the opponent, because you'd be, you could find yourself caught out if you're not informing your team that they've got a long throw or they've got a particular set piece, corner, free kick. Then ultimately you're only harming your own team and yourself. So it's a very good tool at the minute, but I use it probably 75% for the good of my own team. And I show we show a lot of reruns and a lot of footage of our good play and how we can be successful in that next game coming up. And I touch on the opponent probably about 25%, but just them key bits that could make the difference in the game.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, you took Barnet into the playoffs as we mentioned, and then obviously COVID came along and that disrupted the season to a certain extent. But it was a really big achievement, and maybe testament to that. And obviously you hear a lot of rumours, but there was a lot of talk of you maybe moving on to. You were linked with, for example, Southend United, I think, and there were other clubs as well. Reportedly looking at you at that time. Your time at Barnet obviously ended around then. I think your contract maybe ended, was it? And did you take a decision to leave, or are you able to sort of shed light on a little bit of what happened there? And was there any sort of truth in the rumours, for example, with Southend United and others? To tell us just about how it kind of ended, and obviously for the Barnet fans who may be listening, your kind of your thoughts on how it all ended.
Yeah, there was truth in other teams being interested. There's no doubt about that. But I was, when lockdown started, I was put in my notice period, and then obviously we came back for the playoff period halfway sort of through that, and unfortunately we lost to Notts County, which was such a disappointment. And conversations were then had about me staying and being offered a new deal. But listen, the simple facts are that me and the chairman sat down and we couldn't find a way forward. There was a number of things, not just my personal contract, but there was a number of things that I wanted to put in place, and that I felt that we could be doing better, and it was just two adults that simply couldn't agree on a way to take the club forward, and I chose to shake hands and walk away. And I haven't got any regrets. I say I haven't got any regrets. I'm gutted we never got promoted. I'd have loved to have taken the club up. I'd have loved that group of players, because they gave me everything, and I'd have loved to have been the one that had got the club back in the league, and the fans would have been great, and we'd have had a wonderful party, I'm sure. But it didn't happen, and I just had to look at my career and decide that I need to probably look elsewhere, because I want to give myself the best opportunity in the most professional environment I can find to allow me to grow and develop myself, and ultimately get where I want to be as well, which is as high up the pyramid. I've got aspirations as I did as a player to get to the very top. Whether I get there or not remains to be seen, but that's what I'm aiming for, and that is ultimately my target. So, it was two grown men that couldn't find a way forward, shook hands, and we moved on.
Yeah, and you balanced the side quite well as well. Like I say, having lost Jack Taylor to Peterborough, to keep the team sort of where you did was really good. And obviously you need to have that motivation, don't you? And it's good to have that ambition. I think it can only suit you well. You've got to aim higher, in my opinion. What can you say about clubs that maybe did come in for you? Was there any reason that, I don't know, for example, Southend didn't happen, or is it difficult to talk about that kind of thing? What's the situation at this moment in time? Because you mentioned you are looking to get back into it. What's your outlook at this moment in time, and what are you doing in this period to keep on top of things within the game? Because it's obviously quite difficult, isn't it, with COVID and that? But what's the situation there?
In terms of other clubs, it's the same as when I was a player, and all players have been through it. You hear a ton of whispers about this club likes you, that club likes you, and it's the same as a player. It's never done until it's done. I know it's cliche, and but one or two conversations were had, and it didn't really get any further than that. And that's how it is until you're sitting in front of someone signing your new contract. It's never over the line. So it was just early conversations, and it never really got beyond that. But in terms of me now waiting to get back in, I've got to be patient, which is difficult for me. I don't particularly want to be patient. I want to be driving to a training ground tomorrow and putting a session on and getting my team ready for a game. But that's not the case at the moment. So I've just got to be patient. I say I'm desperate to get back in. I am. It's as simple as that. I'm desperate to get back in. I want to get back to doing what I do with a group of players, and something that I love doing. But at the minute, it's about being patient. So I'm pretty much at home at the minute, just doing my husband duties and my fatherly duties, hoovering and ironing and keeping the house straight and walking the dog and out running and what have you. But
having a nice break.
Yeah, but I'm sure there'll be another opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
Someone's out there and wants their team to play some good football and wants someone who's obsessed with the game as their manager, then I'm your man.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I think, like I say, the job you've done in a short time certainly stands you in good stead for anyone listening, or for any future opportunities that may come. I wanted to ask you, you talked about analysis there as well. Just a few more questions before we wrap up, and obviously I appreciate your time. Recruitment in the lower leagues, what's your take on that? Because you often hear it's more about networks, and scouting can be quite difficult because of the budgets and resources. We talked about how you get an edge in management at the lower levels. Do you have any philosophies on sort of recruitment as well? What kind of profile of player you look for, or where you see the game in terms of, do you prefer working with the younger players? You said you like to develop players. What's your philosophy on recruitment? And if you were going into a new role, for example, do you already have, you're already watching games and you already know who you think you'd profile, or is it kind of you get your scouts out there and analyse it as you go? How do managers do recruitment at that level from your point of view?
A lot of it is through analysis. A lot of it's through Y-Scout and various other platforms where you can get data and information and stats on players, and then there's nothing that will ever beat what you see with your own eyes.
Yeah.
They're the best scouts in the world, your own eyes. So there's a process. Maybe you get one or two reports on a player, and then you get an opportunity to go and watch them yourself, and then you sort of build this little dossier about them, and then you ask questions to find out about their character, whether they'd fit in your changing room as well. So there's a number of little tools that we all use to find out about players, but like I say, the best one is actually watching them yourself with your own eyes. But what I believe you have to do is, and this is why I don't want to be rigid with certain systems, because I could sit here and say, right, I'm a 3-5-2 man, right, and that is it. But the next job I go into, I'll have to quickly assess whether I've got the components for a 3-5-2.
For sure.
I might walk into a changing room that is better geared to a 4-4-2 or 4-3-3.
Yeah,
so, and then what you do is, if you've got a group of players that you're better geared up at a 4-3-3, then you have to be flexible. You have to play that 4-3-3, and then your principles of what you want in a 4-3-3. If you've got 8 of the players in that 4-3-3 that do exactly what you hope to see in a 4-3-3, you then have to go and recruit the other 3 that you think can make the difference in that system.
For sure.
So, and like I say, when I took over from John at Barnet, I had a group of players that I felt could play in more than one system, which was a bonus. But whatever system I played at Barnet, I just felt I lacked that sort of focal point, which is why I made an effort to chase the centre forward, and I got Alfie Pavey through the door, and he unfortunately got injured, and then I got Paul McCallum through the door, who for me is as good as anyone, if not the best at that level.
He did really well.
And it's about piecing the jigsaw together, and I was missing that one piece, and he was crucial to us, with the run we was going on, Paul McCallum, and helping us get in the playoffs. But when I originally took over, because I only made the 3 or 4 sort of signings during my time there, because there was such a volume of players. Yeah. I signed the goalie, Scott Loach, who's brilliant, absolutely on and off the pitch, top guy, top goalkeeper. And I felt we needed him, because we needed a bigger goalkeeper. We needed a bit more presence from balls in the box, and we needed someone who's comfortable with the ball at their feet as well to help me with my style. Sure. And then I brought in James Dunn, who I knew I'd worked with James before, and I knew the type of character, and he'd be your best mate one minute, and then he'd want to bite your head off the next minute because he's so desperate to win. And I felt we needed that type of aggressive leader, but also a fantastic character in the change room. And then, like I say, with Alfie and Paul McCallum, these boys were that sort of focal point at the top of the pitch. And then everything else I had was I felt was what I was looking for. So it's just about someone giving you a jigsaw, and then you quickly identifying the best way to piece that jigsaw together. And if there's any pieces missing, that's what you go and recruit.
Yeah, for sure. And Barnet have quite a good academy as well. I mean, you had like the likes of Wes Fonguk and others who've come through the academy. So, you had quite a big squad maybe to deal with and manage. And I suppose that's a challenge in itself. Do you have a take on there's always a debate at this moment in time between traditional scouting to a certain extent and, getting out on the ground and analysis. Do you have a take on that debate?
I think there's room for both, to be honest. You can't knock either. At the end of the day, you can get all this information through on data and stats and what have you. And like I say, I could send out someone that I trust to go and watch that game, and they can come back and give me information. It's all important. Even sometimes some negative feedback can be constructive in a way.
Sure.
So I think there's an argument for both, mate. Like I say, there's nothing quite like going and view a player with your own eyes. So they're the best scouts because you know what you're looking for.
If you had to sort of look at if you had players that you'd seen in the lower leagues, the National League, that kind of thing that you think will go on, is there any in your mind that spring to mind that you were really impressed with during your managerial time that you look at now and think, yeah, in a few years' time he'll be playing at a high level?
What, at Barnet or across?
Barnet or across the division?
It's going to be hard to name so many from other clubs, but there's plenty out there, mate. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, and I've watched enough games even when I played at Hendon at the very back end of my career in the Ryman Prem.
Yeah,
a lot of these boys just need a chance, and then it comes down to the bravery of the manager to give these boys a chance at higher up the league. So, I would say there's certainly at Barnet you've got young boys like Efron Mason-Clark. You've got, like you said, Wes Fonguk, who's a terrific player as well. Harry Taylor, who's Jack Taylor's brother, is a very good player. Josh Walker, who unfortunately has been injured this season, but I mean he's as good as I've worked with and good as I've played with in terms of in front of goal with both feet. I mean his finishing ability is first class. So these boys, what they have to show is a level of consistency to make people really take a bite on them, and they will get their chance. But there's a number of players in the National League and probably the leagues below that will climb the ladder. I can't think of any off the top of my head name wise of opponents, but
no, that's fair enough. That's quite enough.
More or less every game we played in last year, there's one or two that you think they could play at least one level up. Yeah, at least.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who watches non-league quite a lot, I certainly agree with you, and I think there is talent there. It's just about maybe getting opportunities, and as we've seen in the recent years, there's a lot of players going from non-league to have a good career in the game at pro level. So. Yeah, no, definitely interesting to get your perspectives on that. As I mentioned, we're coming towards the end of the show, so yeah, like I say, I really, really appreciate your time. A few final questions. I mean, you're as you said, you're doing your housework at the moment. You're biding your time. You're chomping at the bit. I assume you're probably watching a lot of football as well. Are there managers that you look up to for inspiration, or that within the game that you look towards and think, yeah, I really like that manager's style of play. I really like what they're doing with their club, even at the highest level, for example. That spring to mind, or even abroad, or teams that you watch that you look at and say, yeah, that's a team you should definitely watch if you get the chance, kind of thing.
Do you know, I watch all football at all levels across the world. If there's a game of football on, then I'll comfortably sit there and have a watch, because there is always something to watch and learn. I like watching a lot of people's interviews because I think you can learn a lot from people when they're interviewed. How humble they can be, how honest they can be, their opinion of the game based on what I've just personally watched as well. So I will question, am I seeing it the way they're seeing it, or have I seen something that they haven't mentioned? And then I start to question myself, and it just creates all these thoughts in your mind. But certainly when you look at the minute, if I put my player's cap on, you think how nice would it be to play for someone like Klopp, who just looks like the most energised man in the world.
Yeah.
And then you want to play for Guardiola because he wants to play the perfect, beautiful game.
Yeah.
And then, even people like Sean Dyche for an example of someone who's straight as a die, honest as the day is long, will tell you it how it is. There is no grey area with him.
Yeah.
And I like the way he interviews. Not necessarily do I want to play his brand of football, but I like the way he talks. I like the way he conducts himself. I like the way he behaves in front of the camera. So there is all of them. I like seeing people that love football, energised by the game, and that I can feel their passion for the game, whether it be through an interview or how they jumping around like a lunatic on the touchline.
Definitely.
So there is always, absolutely always, something to be learnt every time you watch a game of football.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And I mean, just on that note, I really enjoyed I don't know if you saw it, but I really enjoyed the Jose Mourinho sort of Amazon Prime documentary. That was really fascinating insight into management and how a manager thinks, and certainly would recommend that if you haven't seen it. But
I've seen that as well, and and he is he's just presence, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's just you can't. How can you question him? And I see and I see a million people ranting and raving about how he maybe behaves and how he talks, and sometimes he's miserable. And so, how can you possibly question it? How am I going to sit here and justify questioning someone like him who's won all what he's won? I've just got to look at him and learn, haven't I?
Yeah, exactly.
So when you get the top ones like him and Sir Alex and bloody Arsene Wenger and that, these guys are genius at what they do. So it's just, like I say, it's just about learning all the time.
For sure. And I think one of the things with that documentary that I found is that Mourinho was really able to pinpoint what was going on in a game, whether it was like a particular player not tracking back, or whether it was just the environment around him, the fans maybe having an impact. Like he was really good at just analysing exactly what was deciding this match, which I found fascinating. And I'm sure for you as a young coach as well, that maybe gives some insight. I mean, if you were, maybe my final question, if you were, you've obviously had your first role and you've got a taste for it. If you were passing on advice to someone looking to get into management in the future, who's young now, maybe doing their badges, what one piece of advice or thing that you've learned would you pass on to others? Is there anything that you learned on maybe your coaching badges, or any one key bit that you've seen in management already that you would say to someone if you're passing on a bit of advice?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's ultimately the key to coaching for me is we all have these pictures and scenarios and these beautiful patterns in our head, and the key to good coaching for me is how you translate that, what's going on in your head, into your players. So I think it's important. Everyone sees the game a particular way, and you've got to coach them in such a way that they buy into how you see the game. So, it's really important you get your own style of play. You stand by it through thick and thin. And for me, it's about I'm quite big on your terminology. So the one or two things that I use regularly, like little words, little buzzwords, and what have you, they're important because they strengthen your beliefs. And I think the best coaches have the best ability to be able to, whatever they see in their head, they can put it straight into their team. The team understand it very clearly, and then they can go and deliver it.
Well, that's fantastic, Darren. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode this week. It's been really, really good to get your opinions and get your take on the game. Obviously, you've had such a fantastic early part of your career, including that massive win against Sheffield United, the cup upset at Barnet. So it looks like you've got a good future in the game, and I'm really happy that you joined us. That'll be it for this week on the Just Football podcast. We'll be back. I hope this has given an insight into management at the lower leagues and what it takes to get into your first role in management, the things you need to consider and different approaches to management in the lower leagues and being a young coach. We'll be back in coming weeks. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Just Football, or on Facebook, we are Just Football, or you can also grab us on LinkedIn. You can grab us in many different places. And of course, for the podcast itself, don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. So that'll be it for this week. We'll be back soon, like I say. Thanks very much for listening. Hope it's provided you with some value. And for now, goodbye.